This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. And my guest today is Annette Smith, and she has a podcast called Music Junkies. And I'm really interested because for the last 5 years, I've been doing podcasts with performers all across the United States, some even in Europe and in Asia. And our podcasts are basically them talking about what it took for them to get started in the industry and why they're still in the industry. But then I see this podcast, Music Junkies, like, what could that really mean? So welcome, Annette, and give us a heads up.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Sure. So let's talk about the name first, Music Junkies.
Yeah, where do I even start? Love music, obviously, like a junkie, right? Okay. So this kind of went hand in hand. I didn't really think about the main name too much, just kind of popped in, and that's just kind of what I decided, that I thought it would be a great name for a podcast. I didn't really know that it was going to ever be a podcast, but I just loved the name. I've always liked the name, and just started kind of researching and seeing what was out there. And I did see a few other podcasts out there that were called Music Junkies, maybe a little bit discouraging, but I thought, I listened to them and there were nothing about anything that I was doing. So I felt A-okay to use the name.
Absolutely. So, a lot of people think that when you talk about music, rock and roll, that's part of Cleveland, the home of rock and roll, or maybe it's a little bit into Motown, which is Detroit. But a lot of times we don't think about Canada and music. So I know you're from Canada. So, did you ever feel like Canada was the home of the music and United States was maybe this other entity?
No, actually, I didn't. I thought, obviously there is some great Canadian artists in Canada, not as much as obviously all over the world. And I accept that. That's okay. I like music from every single continent. So to me, it doesn't really matter where you're from. As long as you're putting out something amazing to listen to, I'm going to listen to you.
I love that. So are you also a musician?
No, I'm not. I've dabbled in the drums for 20 years, still not a professional drummer. I've always just loved, you could probably play any song and I would know that song. So I've always been really good at just hearing and listening, name that tune crazy kind of person with music. And then I've DJ'd. So, I've just explored lots of different things on music. My husband plays guitar, which I love. There's always, if we hear a song, I'm like, oh, you need to learn this on the guitar. He always says you should sing. And I'm an awful singer, so that's probably not a good thing to do. But sometimes we go down there and play, which is fun. It's more if I have like 9 balls of wine in me, then I'll sing.
Yeah, I can sort of understand that. I have 2 sons, one who does not sing at all. At least I don't think he does. I've never heard him. My youngest, who is 31, music and sports has been his world, ever since he was a little one. And he won't let my husband and I sing in his presence because it really hurts his ears. So, we're always asking him to perform. And typically, if he's not on stage, we don't get to hear him. So he's one of those. But so you've had this love for music.
Yeah.
You've dabbled in the drums. You have a husband who's a musician. So what was your thought when you first started podcasting? What did you want to get across?
Yeah, it's funny because the podcast actually started, obviously I was talking to one of my best friends in the world. We've been best friends for 35 years and we grew up pretty crazy, pretty intense way that we grew up. So I thought, wouldn't it be really cool if we started a podcast and we just talked? We just kind of talked about all our experiences growing up, all the crazy things that we've been through. Maybe it'd inspire people or, relate a little bit. Couldn't really get her to commit too much. So I started then I talked to my daughter. I said, what do you think about this? Kind of doing a mother and daughter thing. She was on board, but I didn't see a lot of, yeah, let's go do this. So it was still in the back of my head. So I reached out, you probably have Kijiji as well. So I put an ad out on Kijiji, and I was looking for extraordinary stories that you've been through that has maybe changed your life. And I was getting all of this feedback back, right? All these stories. And as I was reading them, I felt tons of empathy for them, but I thought, God, I don't think I want to do this. This is too much, right? I'm in the financial sector. I own a finance company on the side. As my main job, I do Music Junkies on the side, but I'm dealing with enough of that. I'm dealing with enough stories, enough, I don't want to say tragedy, but I'm babysitting enough, right? The last thing I really want to do is now not that I'm saying that it would be negative. I think the stories would be amazing, but I'm already doing that in my other line of work. So to bring that and now do that as something being creative, because I was looking for something to be creative, I didn't want to do that. So me and my husband were actually just sitting on the table, and at the table having a glass of wine, and we were on Spotify, and he was going through my playlist, and he's like, remember this song? And I'm like, oh yeah, I remember we did this, or this happened. And I said, what if I do a podcast about people, love for music, but not so much a love for music, more as they can go and pick 10 to 15 songs that they absolutely love, that they have some wild, crazy, ugly story, whatever the story is that is around that. And why don't I do that? And he thought, geez, that'd be a good idea. Let's do it right now. And I'm like, what do you mean? Let's do it right now. He's like, let's go in the office right now. I have a playlist. Let's go through my playlist. So we did. And it just kind of magically appeared. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. This was in June of this year. And then I reached out to my daughter. I said, hey, would you be interested in that? She said, yes. And then, I had 50 people like that, like in an instant. Didn't matter who I asked. They were interested in exploring it and doing it. And every time I do it, it just gets better and better. Like I love the stories. I love how people are so open to it. Again, in my line of work, there's lots of rejection, right? I'm dealing with finance. So it was just so refreshing to always get yeses, right?
Absolutely.
And so it's crazy. I can't even, I have a stack like this big of people's playlists that I still have to go through. So I love that it is a different part of me, a part that I really love, because I really felt like, not just during COVID, but over the last 15 years doing finance, I really felt that my creativity had been really kind of lacking. So this has just gave me more energy, and I love it. Absolutely love it.
And when I read about your podcast and then I went out and listened to snippets of it, I realized that many of us are offering our listeners the same ideas, but in different formats. You're asking them, bring your playlist and let's talk about how you got from A to Z, because there are people out there who are saying, I can't even get to B. And it's like, but you can, but you got to find that creative way to do it. And so being on Avoid the Maze, it's all about finding that journey that really works for you. What is that catalyst that says, okay, I can be happy today because I'm listening to my playlist, or you know what, my playlist just doesn't do it for me. And, I need to hear it from other people. Like, what are you doing? What are you listening to? So congratulations on coming up with that concept, because, I wouldn't have thought about, hey, put it on a list of music. And where was I at the time that I heard it? Or what does it remind me of?
Yeah, and I love it because now what it's created is and I call them my little junkies, and it's just like where people can be like, they can listen to that podcast, whoever it is, and obviously I'm not playing a lot of the song, but then they can go to Duff's playlist and they can listen to Duff's playlist, or they can go to A-List playlist or T-Bone's playlist or whoever's playlist. And now it's just created this kind of community where not only do they get to understand that person in the podcast, but they also get to hear their playlist. And then each of them get to kind of really know each other outside of that too, because I'm networking them, I'm promoting them, and they're just average Joe people. That's what I love about it the most. It doesn't need to be Pink or Eminem. It's just average Joe people that love music and just want to share a story that goes along with that music. Because I believe music can help us in any time of our life, whether we're down, happy, sad, mad, going through divorce, whatever the situation is. There's always some kind of song that will bring you back to that memory. And that's the part I love about it the most, is just watching my guests' eyes light up, remembering this time, whether it's good or bad or ugly, but being able to relive that and how much that artist and that song has affected their lives. And I don't even think that artists really understand it as much as what I've seen over the last, call it 3 months.
I know, and I think you're very right there, because number one, if they're considered way up here on the top, they're really not listening to what any of us are saying. Okay, they're listening to their management group, they're looking at numbers, and they're just going out and performing because somebody's telling them to some degree. It's our local musicians who are, writing day and night, sometimes playing just to a computer screen because they want to get their music out there and they want to share it, and letting them know what is, what you're feeling. I happen to have a friend in Saratoga Springs, New York, phenomenal musician, and he wrote a song called Enough. And when I listen to it, it reminds me of my mother as she was leaving this earth, just wishing all of her children enough. And enough could have been anything. It could have been money, love, friendship, kindness. And every time I hear it, I picture my mother differently. And I've shared that with Jeff. And I said, this means so much to me. And he goes, it's interesting, because when he was writing it, it was about his own personal love.
Yeah.
And, since then, when I interview musicians, we talk about, you started this 15 years ago and you put it away. What did it mean 15 years ago? And what does it mean today? And what kind of feedback are you getting from it? So you talk about being in the financial world and that being real, but also crazy. Like you said, a lot of rejections can come from that. But rejection can come from music as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. But I'm not an artist, so I'm not going to get rejected.
Right. So what happens when somebody sends you a playlist and you look at it and it's like, I don't even know what this music is, because I used to be a snob. If I couldn't get the sound to a point in the first couple seconds that I liked it, I was switching off. Okay. Yeah. How do you take care of things like that?
Yeah, so that's my favorite part of actually doing this, is being, obviously there is some people that I don't know and they send me their playlist. So I force myself. That's the best part of it. We have some property just outside of Calgary and we go there quite regularly. And my whole hour and a half driving there is listening to that person's podcast, for I can get in their head. And I probably have, I've created my own my own kind of playlist on Spotify outside of my original playlist that are all for my guests of songs that I've never heard, right? That I absolutely love now. And it's crazy because songs that I've never been exposed to would be the same thing. I've never been kind of a snob with music. I generally like everything, but I was the same way. If you can't catch my attention in 3 seconds, then I'm probably not going to listen to you. But because of this podcast, I want to get into their mind and what they feel, because I have no idea, if they like Whitney Houston, I Will Always Love You. And my first thought is, oh, this is probably a love story. But actually, it might not be a love story. It could be something totally outside of that. And that's what I love about it, because I get to get in their brain a little bit and I get to really kind of come up with my own characters. It really helps me design the questions that I'm going to ask them too. Obviously, if they're sending me a podcast that's all slow songs, I get to play around a little bit like that. Like, geez, this is depressing. Like, what's going on in your life? Like, let's get some fun in your environment. So I love that aspect of just kind of figuring out what kind of people they are by their playlist. And then it's crazy. A lot of people that I know that have did this podcast, I know why we're friends just by their playlist.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So they say that music is absolutely the key when it comes to people with either brain injury, dementia, and Alzheimer's. Have you gotten playlists from anybody that has told you that we created this playlist for my mother or father and it brought back memories for them?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe not to that extent, but again, I've dealt with sexual assault. I've dealt with suicide. I've dealt with obviously many divorces. I've dealt with, lots of like strong subjects that song would bring back that memory. And it's really cool to hear that song got them out of that situation that they're in, right? I'm assuming I'm going to come into a lot of that stuff, but a lot of it just brings back, my mom was sick and I remember listening to this song, or this was kind of, my dad was always a hard ass and this is what we used to listen to, or this song reminds me of this. So I think that music can affect people in all different ways. So eventually I'll probably run into that, but it's mostly just been more personal stories. Nobody's sent me a playlist and said, hey, this is what I'm doing with my mother yet. I haven't got any of that kind of stuff yet.
Well, I just listened. I didn't see it originally, but I listened to the replay of an interview with Tony Bennett and his family. And Tony Bennett's last concert, he's full Alzheimer's, but when he hears the music, he can sing the songs and he can sing it as beautifully as he ever did. But his family was talking about the fact that his manager and his son, who also manages him, and Lady Gaga, they knew enough about him to be able to figure out how he would react on each of these songs. And he did. And he was even able to have dialogue in between the songs because of that.
That's good. I love it.
So again, listening to that and then going back and listening, to your podcast, I'm thinking to myself, this is phenomenal, because a lot of times we listen to music, but we don't pay attention to it at that time.
Yeah.
And then you could be sitting in your house and there's a TV program and you hear that same music and it's like, oh my gosh, I remember something. Or those are the words, or that's what it's supposed to mean. And it gives you that ability to say, hey, I'm aware. And that's what music can do for all of us.
Yeah, it's a state changer for sure. Right? It doesn't matter what you're listening to. If you are listening to something sad, it will put you in that sad state. If you're listening to something upbeat, it will put you in that upbeat state. It's a state changer. Absolutely. And then you just have to decide what state you want to be in when you're listening to that music.
Exactly. So when you asked your daughter to get involved in this, is she a musician herself, or is she a podcaster? No. Just wanted to.
I thought it would be really cool to do. We're in business. She works for me in the financial sector, so we're already in business together. And I know she has a creative side. She loves to sing. She's not like pursuing it as much as she'd want to. So I thought it would be something fun to get her out of that kind of comfort zone where maybe she would go and focus on doing singing. But she's 24. What can you expect?
I understand that very well. And that's part of the journey when you avoid the maze, because as you avoid it, you become more aware. You can be more open to things. You're very lucky that your young daughter wants to work in the same business as you, and you've got that connection. But there are parents out there who are saying, my kid just doesn't want anything to do with me. They turn 21 and it's like hands off.
That's right.
But when you find something that can connect you, it's amazing. And that's how my son and I really got our relationship fixed over the years. I was a communication major and I hadn't finished, and here he was graduating high school. And I said, no, you're not going to get your full degree without me getting mine. And I went back to school and got my communications degree. And the day I got it, he went into internet sports broadcasting for a while.
Wow.
And I was so jealous. I mean, I told him right from the beginning that, I want to be, announcing. And he just looked at me and said, then just do it. And it was like, how do you just do it? And he did a little bit of research and he said, okay, here. But you got to have a theme, Mom. You can't just talk. And it was great because we've done some together, like, you and your daughter. And he now does a football sports broadcast on his own.
Cool.
And we share notes. I'm not allowed to listen to it though when he's around. So I that's the only part Mom doesn't get. It's like, whatever. So tell me a little bit about the music in Canada. Is it any different than it is here in the United States, or do you have the same performers going back and forth?
Well, I'm not really, I guess I wouldn't really know a lot of that stuff.
Okay.
I'm assuming that there's just more opportunity in the US, right? Obviously it's way bigger, right? More people. So I don't really know how to answer that question, to be honest. That's just not my specialty in marketing artists. So I don't really know.
Well, I didn't know if your playlists, that you're getting from people are more Canadian musicians or if they're musicians in general.
It's all over, to be honest. I want this not necessarily when I first started. I want this to be people that are open, willing to share, have a crazy life, have a good sense of humor. I ask pretty evasive questions during the podcast. I want them to be open. I don't want anybody really to be closed off. And if that, like today I'm interviewing a cop. We'll see. Right. So I never turn anybody down, but I don't go and search for artists to be on my podcast. I want to just keep it as just anyone and everyone. I just did a lady the other day that's, has a cooking show. So, hey, it was a really cool podcast because she loves music and she loves to cook. And if I can go and promote her business, because I usually promote for about a week.
Right.
So if I can go promote her business for her and she can go get more followers, more people that want to go to her cooking show and all of that stuff, then that is really why I'm doing it, is more to promote them. So I just take whoever comes. I did some artists. I think they're awesome, mostly local, like Brent Tyler was amazing. He's a really good friend of mine. I know a lot of people. So for me, I'm just like doing it to have fun. And hey, if I get a call from Eminem one day and he wants to be on the podcast, then absolutely I'll do that. But I'm not right now going and seeking that out. I'm more or less just wanting to just talk to anybody that is kind of open to having a conversation. Yeah.
That is wonderful. Now, how can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm on Spotify, obviously all the platforms. You have to look up Music Junkies podcast. The other one will come up as Music Junkies. So make sure you say Music Junkies podcast so they can find me there. I'm on Instagram as well under Music Junkies _. You can find me on there as well.
Well, we hope that everybody is going to follow you because I think we can learn lessons. And I think that's the importance behind most of us who are doing podcasts. I'm not going to sit here and say that because I do anywhere from 4 to 6 recordings a day that I'm making money. I'm not. Okay. What I'm doing is like you, I'm networking, I'm connecting with people. I'm helping people find you. And if they find you through me, that means that they're listening to me. So, that's the first step. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's important to network. You never know who you're going to run into. I sat down with an amazing, 4 guys that have a podcast, 1001 Songs That Make You Want to Die. They're hilarious. But they're in Australia, right? And I
Right.
just came across their podcast. I had no idea how long they've been around for, and reached out, and they were like, yeah, absolutely want to be on your podcast. It's hilarious. So I love this is such a cool community. Again, very, very different than what I'm used to. And that everybody in this kind of podcast community wants to help and support each other.
Exactly.
And that's what I love about it the most, is that, hey, you should be on my podcast. Oh, hey, you should be interviewed. I never would have thought that I'd ever be asked to be interviewed ever, right? It was just something that I didn't really think about. Yeah, it'd be cool, but never really kind of put it out there. So thank you for asking. I appreciate it.
Oh.
And promoting as well. It's awesome.
Well, and that's how we all learn. Okay. And for those that are listening and saying, I've thought about doing a podcast, I'm not sure if I should,
Do it.
jump in, try it. If you
Just do it.
if you don't like it, then you'll stop.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how I started out. It was like, I actually went to other groups and offered my services because I wasn't sure I wanted to do the investment. And you can invest very little into podcasting if you want.
Yeah.
But I decided that if I was going to do it, I was going to invest properly and, make it a business. But there are people who go out onto Facebook Live and Instagram, and they may not call it a podcast, but that's what they're doing. Okay.
Yeah.
They're sharing. And that to me makes this a much better world when we can all share together.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
So I want to thank you for joining us. We will have all your information in the show notes. So anybody who's listening and you said, hey, how do I find Annette? Well, guess what? Just read it in the notes. You'll see it. There will be links, and you can listen to her podcast as well, or maybe be on her podcast. That would be fun.
Hey, yeah, absolutely. I'm open. If, you have, you have a love for music, you have a good sense of humor, you're open to share your stories, I'd love to have you on my podcast. And again, you can reach out to me on Instagram, right? I look exactly the same.
I love it.
Music guest. It's awesome. Thanks so much, Karen.
Well, thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too.
Now.
Bye.